Now we're starting tonight in Zimbabwe, a country which is currently looking for a central bank governor. More so after Gideon Gono stepped down as the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe about 12 days ago. On his watch, Zimbabwe's inflation went up to 200 million%, and currently the Reserve Bank cannot function as a country's central bank should, since it's unable to play the role of a lender of last resort. Now, while a few former bankers have been suggested as potential successors, there's still no clear runner yet. Here's CCTV's Farai Makutuya with more.
The former boss of the Exchequer presided over Zimbabwe's most turbulent economic period. Some critics blame him for fueling inflation by printing local currency to fund government operations and dabbling in quasi-fiscal activities outside of the mandate of an ordinary central bank. Those who defend him say these were extraordinary times that called for extraordinary measures. Gono was a close confidant of President Robert Mugabe, and some say this left him vulnerable to political interference.
There's been quite involvement of politicians in the way the central bank had been run. And across the world, you will see that most effective governors, they don't take orders, especially from politicians.
The new bank governor inherits a financial sector that is in poor health. One bank has just closed its doors, while at least one other is battling to stay afloat as it faces liquidity challenges. The central bank itself does not have the funds to play its role of lender of last resort. It has also been sidelined from managing foreign currency reserves, since Zimbabwe trades in multiple currencies that businesses can withdraw or deposit freely. The problems are part of a broader malaise in the entire economy, which the Reserve Bank cannot resolve by itself.
But if they wanted to run the central bank properly, they should be looking at ways of recapitalizing the central bank, but more particularly finding ways of ensuring that Zimbabwe can recapitalize itself by improving on levels of production, partly so that we can avoid having to import things we can easily produce ourselves, and partly so that we can dramatically increase the exports of the things that we can produce.
A former deputy governor, Dr. Charity Dliwayo, has been appointed in an acting capacity for 3 months. She and 2 others could take up the job, which until the Reserve Bank is capacitated, will just mainly be monitoring local banks to ensure that they meet prescribed capital adequacy levels. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe building behind me towers over all other buildings in Harare CBD. Now, it's not yet quite clear who will take over the reins next at the central bank, but whoever it is, what is clear is that they may not wield the same influence or have the same capacity as their predecessors. Farai Makutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Elsewhere, the World Bank is urging Uganda's government to be much more transparent in its management of the country's natural resources, particularly oil. The bank's vice president for Africa has said such resources do require proper management. Speaking in Kampala, Makta Diop insisted that revenues must benefit all citizens. Uganda has an estimated 3.5 billion barrels of oil reserves. The government says there has been full accountability to date. It says a slice of oil revenues that are attributable to government will go into a petroleum reserve fund, and that will be audited twice a year, and those results will be presented to Parliament for scrutiny.
We need to make sure that this wealth will be coming from oil, from gas, from mining, from everywhere, will be translated in higher income for the poor. It will be translated in improvement of human development indicator. It will be translated by better governance. It will be translated by transparency. It will be translated by more accountability from leaders in Africa.
There will be no secretive company that sits somewhere with a shadowy board that will decide where the money goes and how it is spent. Everything will be done through Parliament, audited by the Auditor General, and appropriated through the national budget of Uganda.
Let's head over to South Africa. Northam Platinum, it's one of the junior mining companies in the platinum sector. It expects to lose about $48.3 million this year alone due to an ongoing strike of more than 7,000 of its employees. The platinum producer also said that the walkout, which is being led by the National Union of Mine Workers, has cost employees close to $7.15 million in lost wages so far. Now, prospects for a resolution in late January have been raised by NUM's 2-year wage agreement with Anglo-American Platinum. That agreement in turn will see raises of between 7.5% and 8.5%, which is roughly in line with Northam's offer and still above inflation. Platinum producers in South Africa, which has about 80% of global known reserves of that particular metal, are grappling with a combination of low prices, soaring costs and labour unrest. Platinum prices have been depressed by sluggish demand, especially in Europe, where the metal is used to make emissions-capping catalytic converters for diesel engines. Platinum spot prices have fallen by about 15% so far this year. Right then, Kelly Lemon is live in London now with some analysis on developments with respect to South Africa's platinum sector. She joins us now on the line. Kelly, given these recent wage agreements, how do we expect those to then impact the current deadlock that we're seeing at Northern Platinum?
Well, it's certainly adding tension, especially now, as you say, that Anglo-American platinum workers, that deal that see wage rises between 7.5% and 8.5%, which are being backdated to July and are just in time for Christmas. But Northern Platinum workers are expected to go back on strike next year as they look for a 16% wage increase and almost 70% increase in the living out allowance. But Northern Platinum says its offer is final. Now, analysts say now that others have agreed smaller wage rises, it's leaving the door open for others to follow. But as we head into Christmas, both sides are standing firm and we could see more of the same next year.
Indeed, let's look at the sort of pressures that platinum miners in South Africa really are under. Spot prices down 15%, the car business in some respects doing relatively well. But what sort of pressures are they looking at on their balance sheets?
Well, absolutely, like you say, down 50% this year. I mean, that's a massive drop, and we're seeing a combination of lower prices, soaring costs and issues with labour are putting producers under real pressure. Now, a lack of demand from Europe isn't helping either. Don't forget, South Africa accounts for about 75% of the world's platinum supply. So analysts are also concerned about the domestic impact of these strikes, as they could dent an already sluggish economy.
Indeed. Finally, Kelly, the fact of the matter is AMCU can go on strike at all three top platinum producers in 2014. What's the outlook for production in that year?
Yes, as you say, well, Northern Platinum says it expects to lose about $48 million this year due to strikes. On top of that, the 6-week strike by the National Union of Mine Workers will cost the 7,000 employees who took part in it about 74 million rand in lost wages. So these strikes are certainly having an impact. Now, we're seeing a lot of rivalry and competition between the main unions, with upstart South African Miners Union, otherwise known as the AMCU, ramping up its membership. Producers fear higher membership and rivalry will mean more strikes and disruption, which will ultimately hit platinum production. Indeed, certainly a gloomy outlook there for the platinum sector in South Africa. Thank you very much for that. That's CCTV's Kelly Lemon live in London. Now, we're still in South Africa. The world, of course, does continue to mourn the passing of Nelson Mandela, and his name continues to reverberate right across the South African economy and pretty much the rest of the world as well. So just how important was Mandela's brand to South Africa? That's a question CCTV's Sumitra Naidu put to Mila Motala, CEO of Brand South Africa.
The South Africa of today is in large measure due to what Nelson Mandela and his generation of freedom fighters at the time did. So the principles and the values they imbued the constitution that we're sitting with today, that is what Mandela and his peers have contributed. So the two are in many ways synonymous. As I said, the reputation of South Africa largely hinges on what the values and principles that Mandela imbued upon this country.
Now, a bold experiment by the One Laptop Per Child organization has shown what are being described as encouraging results in Ethiopia. You see, 2 years ago, over 20 illiterate children with absolutely no exposure prior to this to the written word were provided with tablet computers to see whether they would learn to operate them without any prior instruction. Now, following the success of that project, there are plans apparently to scale it up across Africa, as CCTV's Girum Chalan now explains.
The project started by dropping off tablet computers for children residing in the rural Ethiopian town of Wenji, with preloaded programs, and then waiting to see what would happen once the children were left to their own devices. In Ethiopia, this would be the first attempt at the concept of self-learning. Apparently, since the year 2012, a lot has changed.
After this experiment is the change to actual situation, we may use this way of providing education for students from outside school.
The children themselves say they have greatly benefited from the tablet computers, having gotten a basic education. However, they all maintain that they cannot replace classroom education.
Since we started using these tablets, we've learned how to write and speak in English. And we also know every application in this computer. Before, this was just a dream for us.
We'd like more schools to be open for us too.
This project is supported by the African Union as well as the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Both want to use one laptop per child project to pave the way for more usage of technology to drive the uptake of education in the continent.
Everything is a beginning, and we are believing that having sown the seed of this project using the pilot in Ethiopia, we can evaluate it and see how we can scale it up to other disadvantaged communities of our societies that are curious to learn, but they don't have access to learn.
The experiment is being done in 2 isolated rural villages about 50 kilometers from Addis Ababa. According to experts, Africa is still lagging behind when it comes to using technology for providing education. However, projects like this one, if they can be implemented as planned, can realize the much-needed success in transforming societies in this continent. Grumjala, CCTV, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
That certainly should make an interesting basis for a randomized controlled trial somewhere else. Let's move on to Egypt now. The stock market indices there have seesawed this week after the central bank cut interest rates on deposits and lending, sending the market up by 2.39%. That bull run was cut short, however, a day later after the main opposition coalition rejected a plan to put up the draft constitution for referendum. The North African country is seeking to boost its economic growth after national output grew by less than 1.5% last quarter, compared with 2.5% the similar period a year ago. Stocks also got a boost after a panel set up to write a constitution completed its work, paving the way for elections. Now, the apparent rejection by the opposition showed that once again it is politics that actually drives the Egyptian stock market. Violent clashes between pro-Muslim Brotherhood demonstrators and the police are still a major concern to both investors and regular business people in the capital of Cairo.
Over the past 3 years since the revolution erupted, the country has been in a chaotic situation. Therefore, no investor will risk his money before the country has stabilized. But with a fair judiciary, implementation of the law and hard work by government to make it easier for investors to know their rights and duties, this cannot happen before we complete the roadmap, starting with drafting and endorsing the new constitution, because this is an important first step.
There is no doubt that instability or political turmoil leads to a deteriorated stock exchange and leads to mistrust between the bourse and its brokers, especially foreigners and Arabs.
Demonstrations reflect instability. The way that government controls demonstration is also expelling foreign investors. It is not good for investors that a country restricts demonstrators and detain them. Such repressive measures adversely affects any statements. There is no problem for investors to start their business if there is no crackdown restrictions to hold demonstrations. There should be justice and implemented laws.
Now, many African artists do struggle to make ends meet, mainly because their work does tend to be consumed free of charge. Across Africa, the enforcement of intellectual property laws is a very serious problem. Mustafa El Kafi, Morocco's communication minister, was in Cote d'Ivoire recently for a Pan-African conference on intellectual property. He spoke to CCTV's Nicholas Negoche about what needs to be done to close those legal loopholes.
You came in Ivory Coast to attend to a conference about intellectual property. What are you going to take back to Morocco?
That we need to accelerate the process of the ratification of Beijing Treaty and Marrakesh Treaty concerning the first treaty concerning broadcasting and audiovisual copyrights, and the second treaty concerning the access of blind people to the published work without respecting the copyright laws.
Very often, African artists say that politicians don't care about them. What is the message that you want to send to them today?
We need to protect the rights of local artists in order to succeed in promoting creativity, in order to succeed in preserving our cultural identity. So this is something that is so urgent. And with these two treaties, we have now a platform. We have the tools.
China is one of your major partners. So how do you see the cooperation between China and Morocco, and what do you expect more from China?
We are working in strengthening the economic, cultural, political, social cooperation. The strategic position of Morocco provides for China a unique way to Europe and also to Africa. And we have many projects of cooperation. Recently, I met with the Vice Minister of Communication and Broadcasting, and we make a decision that we need to start a dialogue to build a partnership in the era of communication, broadcasting and film making.
Right then, quick run through the markets now. Not a lot of activity, frankly, partly because Egypt, of course, today being a Friday, the market there wasn't working. And of course, in Kenya, we still have a holiday going on. The rest of the board is essentially in the red. The all-share index in Nigeria is still treading water, down by 0.03 percentage points. The all-share index in South Africa also having a fairly nasty day. It was relatively higher earlier in the day, but of course the mining stocks did take quite an absolute beating later on in the course of the day. Some platinum shares falling by about 2 percentage points. At the end of the day, it ended the day lower, down by a full 0.5 percentage point.